The Las Vegas Raiders football franchise, once a symbol of dominance in the NFL, continues to struggle under the ownership of Mark Davis. After years of instability, the team's issues can't be boiled down to just the coach or quarterback. It's rooted in something deeper: Davis's inability to define his own identity for the team. This inability has resulted in a franchise in search of itself, clinging to the fading image of its past rather than crafting a future of its own. The shadow of the past. The heart of the Raiders' identity crisis is Mark Davis's obsession with the Raider way, a nebulous, romanticized concept tied to the legacy of his father, Al Davis, the legendary former owner and coach of the team. Mark Davis seems to believe that replicating the past glory of the Raiders, captured in yellowed photos and fading memories, is the key to reviving the franchise. Yet, in trying to recreate that image, Davis is stuck in a never-ending cycle of failed coaching hires, each one promising to restore the once-proud culture of the team, only to end in disappointment and mediocrity. Since Mark Davis took over the Raiders in 2011, after his father's passing, the franchise has gone through an astonishingly high number of head coaches. The team has cycled through 5 head coaches in just 13 years: Dennis Allen, Jack Del Rio, John Gruden, Josh McDaniels, and Antonio Pierce. Each of these coaches entered the fold promising to bring back the legendary Raider culture, only to leave with unfulfilled promises and underwhelming results. With Pierce's firing in January 2025, the team will have had 6 different head coaches during Davis's tenure, marking a glaring trend of instability. This endless rotation of head coaches is a symptom of something larger: Mark Davis's inability to carve out a unique and sustainable identity for the Raiders. Each new coach brings with them their own interpretation of what it means to be a Raider, yet the results are always the same: frustration, mediocrity, and disappointment. Rather than building on the Raiders' history, the team has been chasing an image of what it used to be, while failing to adapt to the realities of modern football. A cycle of failure. The Raiders' most recent coaching change was the firing of Antonio Pierce after a 4-13 season in 2024. Pierce had been hired by Davis in 2023 to reboot the team, but his tenure was marred by an inability to solve the team's most pressing issue: quarterback. The lack of a stable, effective quarterback was one of the key factors in the Raiders' struggles, and despite early promises of a fresh start under Pierce, the team's performance on the field remained lackluster. Pierce's firing was a particularly awkward moment in the Raiders' ongoing saga. According to reports, Pierce was already in discussions with the front office about potential staff changes when he learned, just one day before he was set to address the media, that he was being let go. The Raiders' official statement about Pierce's dismissal was nothing more than a brief, impersonal paragraph paying tribute to his silver and black roots, and thanking him for reigniting what it means to be a Raider. However, the reality was that Pierce's time in charge had ended in disappointment, with his 9-17 record over 2 seasons hardly living up to the expectations of the franchise. This failure to establish stability at the quarterback position is indicative of a broader issue within the Raiders organization: Mark Davis's inability to take meaningful action. Even when the team had an opportunity to address its quarterback situation in the 2024 draft, Davis's hesitation to fully commit to a clear plan led to the continued uncertainty at the most important position on the field. The issue with clinging to the past. Problem with the Raiders' repeated failures to return to prominence is not just the revolving door of coaches, but the underlying assumption that the past can somehow be recreated. Mark Davis seems fixated on the notion that the Raiders' glory days, particularly during the Al Davis era, can somehow be resurrected if only he finds the right coach who understands the Raider way. But in truth, that approach has only stifled the team's potential. By clinging to a past that no longer exists, Davis has been unable to push the franchise forward. Other successful NFL teams, such as the San Francisco 49ers and Green Bay Packers, don't constantly look back to their pasts for direction. The 49ers don't harp on the greatness of Bill Walsh and his offensive genius from the 1980s, and the Packers don't obsess over Vince Lombardi's influence on their football culture. Instead, these teams understand the importance of evolving with the times while respecting their histories. They don't seek to duplicate the past, they build upon it. Contrast this with the Raiders. While the 49ers and Packers have had sustained success, the Raiders are stuck in an endless loop of failure, despite having the resources and potential to succeed. A major factor in this is the Raiders' inability to allow their coaches to build their own culture and identity. Mark Davis has never given his head coaches the freedom to implement their vision for the team without interference, leading to a lack of cohesion and a fractured organizational structure. Looking at other NFL teams' success. When we look at other teams in the NFL, particularly those in the AFC West, we see franchises that have embraced a more modern approach. Kansas City Chiefs hired Andy Reid in 2013, just days after he was fired by the Philadelphia Eagles, and they gave him full control over the football operation. Similarly, the Denver Broncos handed the reins to Sean Payton in 2024, trusting him to build a team and a culture that would succeed. Even the Los Angeles Chargers, often seen as an underperforming franchise, recognized the need for a culture shift and brought in Jim Harbaugh to retool their organization. In contrast, Mark Davis has yet to give any of his coaches the kind of autonomy needed to build a lasting, successful culture. The Raiders' inability to create long-term success is directly tied to Davis's failure to take a step back and allow competent individuals to lead the organization without constant interference. Common denominator. Mark Davis is the constant in all of the Raiders' struggles. While the coaches have changed and the players have come and gone, it is Davis who remains at the top, steering the franchise in circles. Until Davis can recognize that his approach is flawed and that he must stop living in the shadow of his father's legacy, the Raiders will continue to be mired in mediocrity. The longer Davis clings to the outdated notion of recreating the past, the further away the team will get from ever achieving true success. If he truly wants to move the Raiders forward, he must embrace his role as an owner in the modern NFL, carve out his own identity for the team, and give the next head coach the freedom to create something new, rather than trying to Xerox a culture that no longer exists. As long as Mark Davis remains the owner, the Raiders will be stuck in the same cycle of disappointment, forever chasing a past that cannot be recreated, rather than building a future that can bring them back to prominence.